Hello and welcome to another episode of the LFC Transfer Room podcast. I'm your host today, Rigo, joined by Damon, as well as our special guest, Liam Tharme. Liam Tharme is a football tactics writer with The Athletic, and he joined back in July of 2022. How has your first year been over at The Athletic, Liam?
Yeah, it's been busy. It's been good fun. Had a men's World Cup in December, which was hectic, and now a women's World Cup as well. And quite a weird, as you guys all know, quite a weird Premier League season. But yeah, all good fun. It's a privilege to do what I do.
What a time to join, eh? What a time to join.
Yeah. No, it's been a whirlwind. I'm equal measures like excited and scared for the next season. We'll see what it throws up.
Definitely, especially with all the moves the Saudi League is making, it definitely has thrown another layer onto everything happening in the footy world. But thank you so much for joining us today. Definitely looking forward to your expertise and opinions, tactics wise, especially with regards to Liverpool. And to get us started on our first topic with regards to Liverpool, go right ahead, Damon.
Let's go into formations, Liam. Jurgen Klopp's well known for his formations and well known for changing it about a little bit. Recently, obviously, we've had a little Trent inverted right back sort of change, and it's changed the way Liverpool are playing. And I won't say it's changed the formation as a whole, but in some terms, it has. For you, looking from the outside, would you see it as a 4-3-3 straight up the back? That's what it starts as ours, but would you also see it as a 4-2-3-1 when going forward?
Yeah, I guess so at times. It's interesting. I was amazed that sort of Arsenal, City, and Liverpool, all sort of the top sides pushing into the season, were also sort of homogenous and playing this similar sort of way of wanting a defender, whether it be fullback or centre back, sort of moving into midfield to be more of a playmaker. I'll be honest that I think probably about 6 months ago or maybe a year ago, when I think people first sort of touted the Trent in midfield thing a bit more for England than they did Liverpool, because there was a period where him and Robertson were just crossing for assists every single week. And I didn't think he could do it personally. He's completely proven me wrong, and I've tweeted as much saying, look, I fully hold my hands up. I thought his spatial awareness might let him down a bit. I never doubted his passing range, but I thought being in midfield, you've got to scan a lot more. Your awareness is different. Where the pressure comes from is different entirely. And the types of passes you play are different. The technique you need, it's not just, always putting side spin to cross and do so from deep. But no, he's been a real joy to watch. I think it was the Leicester game towards the end of the season. I particularly enjoyed where he just picked out a few outrageous passes and split a few lines. So yeah, I always struggle in terms of like codifying the formation because it's so fluid and so many moving parts. So I guess you can call it a box midfield at times, because I try to look at it more in a unit perspective, that his role is kind of playing alongside a defensive midfielder to either play into the two number 10s in front or to access the wide players. So it's hard, even more so nowadays when things are even more fluid and more dynamic. But yeah, his role specifically to me anyway looks like that of a real playmaker.
And with that change, you mentioned just a little bit ago the seemingly the top teams in the Premier League are shifting more to three in the back with a defender shifting into midfield. Does that start even further back with the advent of these ball playing goalkeepers acting more as a sweeper keeper and building up directly from the back? That's why I guess Arsenal's looking at Raya to lend some competition to Ramsdale. Do you think it starts even further back?
Oh, definitely. It's always a knock-on and a repercussion. I guess you have to consider, what was it, 3-4 years ago, the change of the goal kick law as well. The meant players could, now be inside the box. So it's constantly those sort of knock-on effects and those cycles. I think it's also a case that defenses have definitely got better over the years. If you look at sort of from the 60s into the 2010s, look across like World Cup data, the goals per game has massively trended downwards. I think teams generally defend better across all phases of the pitch. So, high pressing now is commonplace in the Premier League for pretty much every team. Your mid-table teams are doing it, which I don't say with disrespect, but that was 3-4 years ago, that was a top six thing of, it's it's cool, it's modern, it's new to press high. And in the same way now that most teams, almost all teams, generally want to play in a similar way, which I think can make it good fun when you get teams sort of like Brentford or alternative teams that don't just want to play the same as everyone else, but are prepared to be that sort of antithesis. But coaches keep having to find new solutions and new ways to be effective. And I guess, the worry now is that by sort of playing with sort of 3 centre-backs, and at times it can take the goalkeeper out of the equation, because at times you almost want the goalkeeper to become that third centre-back and push the 2 centre-backs wider and push the full-backs on. Because I guess, and it's something I've seen a lot with Brighton in the second half of last season, was when you have a goalkeeper that can play, because opposition teams can only press with 10, that's going to give you an overload somewhere. And if someone presses the goalkeeper, space, gets created elsewhere. So it's a constant battle, and I'm sure there'll be a pressing, solution to playing against that system this season, and then teams will start to find new solutions against that, and cycle keeps going on and on and on.
So much for Tony Pulis' Stoke back in the day. I mean, we don't know more hoof balls and long throw-ins into the box anymore. Going back onto Trent then, Liam, how do you see Trent playing? Do you see him as a midfielder now? Do you see him as that inverted right back that Klopp's playing as? Who's getting it right, do you think? Southgate or Klopp?
I think both for different reasons. I think Trent is unfortunately just in the England sense. I mean, one, it's the most competitive part of the England entire depth, and I don't really like the term system player. I find it to be quite degrading, and also in the sense that every player is a system player, and that all they need to do is play effectively in the system or systems that they're playing in. And often when you shift a player out, people forget how elite these guys are. It's their job, they're professionals, they can adapt. And it's almost until you see a player do it, so this is me trying to acknowledge my own bias with Trent of going, I don't think he can do it because I hadn't seen him do it. And then he did it. I went, oh yeah, of course he can. Of course he can adapt, and he can check his shoulders, he can deal with that pressure. So I think Southgate's way of maybe using possession more defensively than I've ever seen Klopp do. Klopp seems to be a lot more about sort of verticality, prepared to take risk on the ball, prepared to lose it because he backs the team to counter press. And I know that has caused issues, particularly at the start of last season, where those counter press either weren't occurring or were too disjointed and got played through. But it just comes down to different styles, I think, of what different managers want. And Trent could probably be repurposed, but what Southgate has liked with Walker and the way that he's played, it's just been a different thing. So I think that's the problem with international football. It depends what the manager wants, and there's no real solutions like that. You can't just transfer to another nation and go and play for a different team in the world. I'm sure he could go and play in France's team, for instance, and be absolutely exceptional, where fullbacks can be a lot more attacking and in sort of the final third. But no, I think it's been a real pleasure to see him, including myself, prove a lot of people wrong and sort of challenge that discourse around how he can play.
Would you say sustainability comes into it as well? Because if you think about international, you don't have to be sustainable because it's once every so months or something like that. Premier League needs to be every single week, so Klopp needs to make sure he's got Trent in the right place. If he plays in midfield, for example, then we haven't got a right back. And is he going to do that at a top level Premier League club and European football? I know we haven't got Champions League this season, but we expect to go back in Champions League next season. And at that level, I think it's a different level to international. Mostly internationals, you're playing like lower league, lower opposition, and again the sustainability of when the international tournaments come round, it's like give Trent a go in midfield. You can get away with that sort of thing, can't you, at that level rather than in Premier League?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people almost underrate the value of that. People are always like, oh, well, you can only do it against smaller teams, and it's almost not worth it if it's people just want to see big game tactics. But I think that's really valuable because it just gives you more solutions and frees you up to play in more different ways. It's effective because then that's then a midfielder that you don't need to buy if you've got this player that can do that and something else. It's becoming more like the all-rounder type that you get in cricket, that when you've got a player that can do multiple things, where you're saving a spot elsewhere on the team because now you can load up on another defender or another forward. I think it's one of the reasons why City was so successful, because suddenly they could play with 5 attackers and they wouldn't lose out on a player in midfield because they still wanted to keep Haaland and stuff. So I think Liverpool are on a very similar sort of adaptability journey. I think it's still more focused around sort of the wingers and the wide players. It's always been in terms of getting that flexibility and having space for those rotations, whereas City's is now obviously focused on the number 9. But I think, give them some time, they will slowly adapt to it. I think it's just different because Klopp's success came with a very specific system in a specific way, and I think people are struggling more to disassociate from that, at least from a sort of media analytical perspective, whereas I think Guardiola has always been famed for maybe inventing, dare I say, quote unquote, new things, or changing something and bringing in a tactic. He doesn't invent all these new things. Hungary played this way in the 1950s, etc. So
until he won the Champions League, that was his the criticism against him. He'd get too nervous and always try to shift something before a big match. Which last year probably Klopp received a lot of criticism for being a little bit too stubborn and perhaps not changing tactics still towards the end of the year. But with Trent inverting now into midfield on a more consistent basis, that also has a knock-on effect on his buddy over on the left wing, Andy. And Andy now has been the subject of criticism, at least on Twitter, with regards to is he suitable for as a player to play in this style, or does Liverpool, if in the transfer market, need to bring in a bona fide actual center back who can play on the left side?
Yeah, it feels difficult, right? Because I think if you'd have asked someone sort of 3 years ago when they were just racking up all the assists and go, in 3 years' time or however long, we'll be having this discussion about not good enough anymore, it'd be impossible to see. I think it's interesting the problem they have, or the difficulty tactically they have at Scotland as well, where he and Kieran Tierney sort of are two very, very good but slightly different sort of fullbacks. With Andy, I think just being a lot more attacking, a lot more advanced, but it's the similar sort of struggles I think Arsenal have had in trying to get Tierney's playing side more, that I believe Robertson plays as sort of a wing back for Scotland internationally and really bombs forward more, and Tierney's is the more conservative one. So it doesn't seem like it's been massively beneficial for him so far. And I guess you then get to the point where you don't want to start pigeonholing players in to a system for the sake of it. And in the case of being sentimental, I think the best teams have always consistently evolved over the years. There'd be no reason why, and I wouldn't say that's any indication just to get rid of him and chuck him sort of thing. But if it's not good for the player and it's not good for the team, then it's not really good for anyone. I wouldn't see any reason why he couldn't go on elsewhere in his career. I think he'd still be very, very good for most Premier League teams. Again, just playing in a slightly different way. I'm sure Liverpool could fetch a decent amount of money for him, and then reinvest that elsewhere. So it's I think it's just a change now from going from the fullbacks to being the creatives to stocking up on, in particular, in Alexis McAllister and Dominic Szoboszlai, really good, powerful, attacking, creative number 10s. There's a clear focus on dominating the centre of the pitch, even more than I think in recent seasons where the wide areas have been just the real danger zones.
Do you think then the focus should be then on Trent being inverted only and not Andy Robertson himself? Because if you think about it, Andy Robertson's never even come inside anyway. He's always been on the wing. He's always linked up well with Mane. He's always got an overlap. Trent's always come inside all the time. He's always sometimes been on the wing, obviously overlapping Salah at the same time. But he comes inside more than what Andy Robertson has over the years. Is it down to cover then, say like defensive midfield and then the centre backs as well, to let Andy Robertson keep his place?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm always a fan of teams attacking asymmetrically or just not necessarily having to do everything in a symmetrical manner if it doesn't benefit them. So I think, from what I've seen, a lot more sort of half-space crosses from Trent, a lot more from deeper, and where he can play inside a little bit more, whereas Andy seems to want to push up. But, then I appreciate if you are going to take him out of the team, you're losing a really, really good left-footed set-piece taker, and someone that I know is sort of ball striking at set-pieces has been worked on and been improved. So, I think it's very easy to just look at a player in open play and say, okay, maybe they're not massively effective here, but Liverpool, when they won the league, I know I think the best set piece team in the league, and that's been a consistent super strength and something I think you'd have to ask a lot of questions about before you make that decision, because you are then removing a really, really good source of attack, which you might not be able to make up for whatever player does come in that place. You might say, okay, you're not ridiculously good in possession. I think teams will get this now, whoever signs James or Prowse, where you go in open play, you're maybe 5, 6 out of 10 about average, but we put you in a dead ball situation. You're an 8, 9, 10 out of 10. And that is, that makes you 8 out of 10 overall. That's good enough.
So, and this is where I kind of have to, you have to maintain that flexibility. So I think discarding, as you said, Andy, just because he's not perhaps the perfect player in this current system, I think Damon was kind of hit it on the head. You need to kind of provide cover for him to allow him to use those skills which are world class. So it's definitely something that needs to be factored in as far as moving forward. I think we can't just because we've changed tactically with Trent inverting, we can't just say goodbye to Andy. But that's just my thoughts. But moving on further up the pitch, or actually no, let's stay on defense. With Trent inverting now, a lot of pressure now has been placed on Konate and having to cover all those acres of space that are left behind. With his injury history, we're pretty much kind of asking for it at this point, for bad news to happen. As we've seen in the preseason and last season as well, Matip as well as Gomez might not be the most optimal or best solution in that right center back role. How much pressure are we inviting too much danger with this tactical change and setting ourselves up for disaster, much like last year where teams just played through us way too easily?
I don't think inherently there's anything wrong with it. I think the problem is that when it goes wrong, and I think when you concede any counter-attack goal, because they're so efficient and so effective that, teams that want to keep possession and play in the final third to play 20, 30 passes in a row and then score a goal, then when they lose it and in 5 seconds, opposition teams gone to their box and scored in one pass, which are often, I think, plenty of the goals that Liverpool have scored. So I guess it's probably more drying when you go, this is what we used to do to teams on a semi-regular basis, and now teams are doing it to us. No, because then I think there's the balance of the amount of possession that you can have with it and the control and the, you can then minimize the game into a number of transitions and the attacks that you concede. If you keep possession better with it, and then suddenly you're defending for 30% of the game versus sort of 40 or 50, that as an attacking thing and possession then as a defensive tool can be really effective. But as you say, I think the difficulty now is that, and to be fair, it's something I noticed when I went back through the numbers and looked across the Premier League last season. Transitions are up across the board. Most teams went up in terms of transitions. I was struggling really to try and link it to too many things, but I think the rise of the inverted winger has definitely been one where you've got a lot of quick, dynamic, individualistic, that's the word I'd say, individual attacking forwards that can get a ball, can drive at defences, can run, can cut inside. Obviously, Liverpool were one of the top teams. Salah was still the top player for counter-attack goals, but you've got people like Rashford, Mudryk, Karim Mitoma. You've got a lot of similar profile players who get the ball and just want to go to goal. So I guess as that's now filtering down the league to, even down to, I'm a Brighton fan, this might sound like bias, but Palace are generally my barometer for like the average Premier League team. Is a team that always seem to come 12th. And when they've got like Eze and they've got Elise and Zaha cutting inside, you're like, okay, everyone's doing this now. So it's probably more risky than it ever has been to play that expansively because more teams can hurt you that way. But I see why Klopp now wants more possession and more control, particularly if it's in ways that other top sides are doing. I don't truly believe that like managers always watch each other and go, oh, I'm going to copy that because it's a great idea. I feel like a lot of it is more organic, but there must be some like degree of competition, right? When you see, that team can play like that, you must get competitive and want to do the same thing.
It's like respecting it in a way because, they are he's going to respect Pep's tactics and Pep's likewise to Klopp. And going on from Konate's cover then is the cover in midfield, the CDM position. Yeah, this is the position we have been talking about on stream for the last 3-4 weeks. The Lavia rumours. Being a Brighton fan yourself, Moises Caicedo's up there. We haven't got one. We have not got a DM. We're going into a Premier League season in literally a week and 2 days against Chelsea away, and we haven't got a known number 6. At the moment, we're literally putting round pegs in square holes or square pegs in round holes at the moment with Curtis Jones in number 6. And I just want you to explain. I had a bit of a debate in our stream chat the other night about Curtis Jones in number 6 and how important a DM is, especially in the Jurgen Klopp system. Now, in general, if you look back at the Premier League winners and their DMs, Fernandinho, Roy Keane, McAllister, Kante, they're sort of players, and Fabinho, our example. How important it is for Liverpool to buy a specialist DM for Jurgen Klopp's system to work? How do you think how important it is?
Yeah, I think you said it's essential. You can go through all the Premier League winners. I mean, City have had Rodri most recently. That's been the real sort of anchor there. Players to stamp out counter attacks, to be ball winners, particularly when you want to press high. I think it's even more important now because a lot of strikers want to come to feet. So you've then got that DM that can track a striker or can cover for a centre back as they step out with them. I really like Curtis Jones. I probably enjoy him more in possession. And I'm fascinated to see because I didn't really realise at the time, but only looking back, I think when he came in sort of the final few games or the final sort of quarter or so of last season, that Liverpool's results picked up seemingly in tandem with it. I'm not attributing that solely to him, but he was really, really good for England at the under-21 Euros. He's played sort of false 9 for them, played in a real sort of deep line playmaker role. I think he's not maybe the most mobile or the most athletic to be getting across the pitch like a Caicedo would be or a Romeo Lavia. It is important, but they've become really expensive, really valuable players. It's something I sort of wrote about earlier on this summer, that profiles seem to become valuable at different times in football. So we've had, strikers now coming back into being really, really valuable because we had the inverted winger rise. Now people want number 9s again. Left foot to centre backs had a premium on them for a real period of time, and still sort of do if we look at Guardiola now. And DMs, when you look at sort of Enzo Fernandez, was the big one that sort of stood out. Declan Rice now going for a big fee as well. And there's sort of becoming 5 or 6 more, I think, already in Tchouaméni, maybe Camavinga too, that people want these players that can ball win. And a lot of these players now, not only can they ball win, but they can play football as well. And these are fullbacks or DMs that can then rotate into the fullback zones when the fullbacks go on. So you're getting more of a balanced player, which is now difficult because I feel like there's fewer of them, or the bar has been raised of what a good one is. So again, they're, you can't just buy a player. There's a certain caliber, especially for what Liverpool are after, which I guess narrows your options, and you're also competing against more top teams now. So it's really difficult, I think, to find the right one to fit that.
So do you think Curtis can have success in the CDM role, playing in the pivot with Trent, or is that just a non-starter? I'm just looking ahead to our first match at Chelsea, and I'm just wondering who our midfield is going to be.
Yeah,
I know two spots are locked down, but who's the third?
Yeah. I think Chelsea wondering who their midfield would be, so you might not be alone in that. But I think, again, as we were sort of saying about playing against low quality teams or games that can have more possession, maybe that's a tactic for certain cup games or against, real low possession Premier League teams, where you're going to say, okay, I can have, Trent and Curtis in there as 2 sort of more ball players or players that can rotate into wide zones. Again, that's not going to be probably even the bulk of your games. It might be a handful, but it's a solution. It's a tool. So no, I think for big games, it wouldn't get the best out of both the players. And I think he came under some critique, didn't he? Was it the Arsenal game, the draw at Anfield, where sort of Trent started playing really well in possession, and sort of, I think people asked some questions about that. I think it was the first time from kickoff maybe that he got into that role, and people were a bit sort of skeptical of it. So it's picking the moments, I think, and big games can be difficult for that. You do sort of need to sort of train it, I think, across a full season.
I think with the thing with Curtis Jones is, I don't know if you watched the game the other day against Bayern Munich, the pre-season friendly, but when Curtis Jones did play there at 6, he tended to drift away from it. And obviously he's used to number 8, he's used to that attacking role. He came from the left wing for the academy and is known as a left winger. Yeah. So to have that sort of mindset for number 6 is completely different to number 8. This is the problem I was having with it in the chat the other day. It got quite heated, to be honest. And they were saying, like, because Curtis Jones got certain attributes, he could play 6. I said it doesn't work like that. I said, Salah has certain attributes that he could play at centre back. He's got pace, strength. You know what I'm saying? He's good on the ball. But it doesn't work like number 8 and number 6 are completely 2 different roles. Number 6, you need to be a workhorse. You need to have the legs. You need to have that defensive mindset of reading the game from back and knowing when to stay back and knowing when you can drift away. Curtis the other day just sort of drifted away to like his number 8 role usually, therefore creating massive gaps and gaping holes. And when Trent pushed forward as well, that's when you saw Matip on his own in the right back position. It's like Matip doesn't have the legs, So is it not just down to Konate? Going back to Konate as well, he's going to be covering Trent. Is it not just down to Konate? Is it down to this DM then to cover? Say Konate moves out to right back, the DM can cover centre back. That's how important that mindset is and that discipline is, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest strengths with the right-sided combination with Trent, Henderson, and Salah, where Henderson would sort of rotate into that zone to hoover stuff up and cover it, as Salah would cut inside and Trent would push on. So it's weird because I think there are things that you don't notice until the players stop doing it or the system starts to go wrong, and then you do concede the transitions because, like, normally you just get used to a player hoovering up the ball or making those tackles, and it's kind of the absence of any evidence there is the thing where then it starts to go wrong and you go, oh my God, we're conceding loads of transitions. And I know that one of the guys I work with at The Athletic, Mark Carey, who's a big Liverpool fan, has done some sort of analysis on, I think, the direct attacks they conceded, which are effectively counter-attacks, breaks from deep for Liverpool were up more than ever last season, been trending upwards as well for a period of time. So it's something I attribute as much to Liverpool's system as the general rise of it across the division. I don't think they're the only ones. This isn't in a vacuum where it's everyone else is fine and Liverpool are just crumbling and falling apart. I think more different teams are getting smarter at finding ways to counter-attack because most teams are getting better at being a good organised defensive unit, and most teams want possession, so suddenly counter-attack becomes more viable again. But yeah, as you say, it does put a lot of demands on the centre-back, and then it's about knowing where the weaknesses or flaws are in your squad. And if your centre backs can't cover the space as well or aren't great 1v1 defenders, then you are sort of setting them up to fail to a degree if you are then exposing them more and sort of playing too overly expansively and just facilitating those sorts of transitions.
And while staying on the midfield, obviously we brought in the only 2 transfers that we brought in, Dominic as well as Alexis McAllister. They've been kind of depending on the preseason match, they've either McAllister's been on the right or the left, or vice versa. Obviously, they're both, flexible enough to play on either side. But moving forward, with the current system in mind, where do you think they best fit with their profiles?
Yeah, it's interesting with McAllister. I can speak more with knowledge on him than Szoboszlai, because I've not seen Szoboszlai as much. But McAllister is interesting because he played in a double pivot alongside Moises Caicedo under De Zerbi for most of last season, and often also sort of in a midfield too, or at the base of a box midfield at the end of Graham Potter's reign. So he was signed, I think, in 2019 from Argentina by Brighton as a number 10, as a player that would play, in the pocket between the lines, play on the half turn, look to score goals from distance, and he sort of slowly drifted back a bit deeper, been a bit more of an organised possession player. He's probably not quite got the press resistance in terms of like receiving on the edge of his box or turning out, but he's a really, really incisive, good player of 1-2s, can combine really well, can mix a good final ball with a good shot from distance and good set piece delivery. So I see why that would maybe push him further up the pitch, and also appreciate that as good as Brighton were last season, it is a slightly different system to what Liverpool are asking for than what Brighton were doing. So there's also a degree to which you just don't really want to clog Trent's space. I think you want players around him that can, occupy defenders, that can pull players out the way, can provide supporting angles to play off of, because there will come a point where people start to either man mark Trent or try and mark him closely, and then you go, okay, that's just going to free up space elsewhere. So who have I got else that's talented there that can play further forward, because if they're pushing players up to mark Trent or to put a sort of a pressing trap there, well, suddenly there's going to be more space further upfield, which is ironic because that's where you want the space. And so many teams now, specifically the top teams, are doing man-for-man presses. So they're literally going one player and one player all the way up the pitch, and there's becoming so much space in behind now that they're leaving 2v2s, 2v3s at the back, where, as Liverpool football know, having a goalkeeper that can kick the ball long well over the halfway line, that can easily become a source of chance creation where, Alisson can strike it over the top, can find Salah running in behind. It's amazing how everything gets, condensed more to one half of the pitch, and then the success can be found elsewhere.
So this is why I want Trent as an inverted right back, because I just think he gets more freedom. When on the ball, Trent is a person that needs the pitch in front of him, and he needs that 180-degree angle. His cross-field passes, his crosses into the box on the wing. If you put him in centre midfield or defensive midfield, to me, is constricted there, and it's easy to man mark him as well. I think as well, because if it comes, you're talking we'll buy a Lavia, for example, Lavia and someone else in midfield covering that space. They take all the midfielders, and Trent comes into open space. This is where the other day against Bayern Munich, you saw Trent on the left back position. At DM, I think it's too disciplined for him to be doing that, and that's why the inverted right back suits him a bit better from my personal point of view. And then going back to McAllister, then you said that he played in a double pivot with Caicedo. You'd know this better than anyone, also being a Brighton fan. Would it work only then alongside a Caicedo, for example? Because McAllister's not a DM as such. He needs someone next to him like a Caicedo.
Yeah, Caicedo was probably more the ball winner in his own half. McAllister's a phenomenal presser, by the way. I remember they don't have publicly available pressure data anymore, but in sort of his first couple of Premier League seasons, I remember sort of semi-regularly checking FBref and some of the stats websites, and he would always come out, if not first, definitely top 2 or top 3 every single game for sort of final third pressures. That his engine is phenomenally good. He's really good at sort of tracking an opposition defensive midfielder, pressing out the pitch. Often under Potter, Brighton would defend in sort of a 4-4-2. And in fact, they did that under De Zerbi last season too. And he would generally go alongside Evan Ferguson and support the press there. So I don't know if he still did, but there was a period where, in fact, I think he still did. He still wore number 10 at Brighton right up until he left, which I appreciate. Player numbers aren't quite what they used to be in terms of being indicative of role and stuff, but he at times would often play like a number 10 who sort of started to drop a bit deeper. So I'm not sure how effective it would be with him and Trent side by side. But then again, I've been wrong about things before that we might see it play together and it might work really well because they can connect well or keep possession well. He's more of a short passer. I think he's not always a big booming like diagonal player like Trent would be. So passing wise, they might complement each other quite nicely.
And to touch on the defensive aspect there, with Dominic Szoboszlai, his pressing numbers have been great in the Bundesliga, and so far in preseason, you can obviously see the talent and the drive is there to win possession back. With that respect, I think perhaps playing on the right might be better, just for the simple fact that we are going to need someone who's going to want to win that ball back immediately with Trent inverting. So, but definitely with the positional flexibility, we won't be as predictable as we have been in the past, and that's something that definitely should give us more freedom and allow different profiles of teams for us to break them down instead of relying on what we have been these past few years. Kind of touching on that positional flexibility. Cody Gakpo has assumed a different role since he's come over to Liverpool. Last year, he finished the year as our primary number 9, kind of assuming that Bobby Firmino role. But obviously, we invested heavily in Darwin Nunez as well to be that leading direct striker. Heading into this year, again, kind of factoring in our current setup and this system, where does Cody Gakpo fit, and where do we get the best out of both players?
It's a really good question. I think Darwin was a bit hard done by with a lot of the narrative last season. Quite a few media outlets seemed quite keen to jump on his case very early for a young player that clearly needs time to adapt. And there was an interesting stat doing the rounds. I can't remember when it was, but I think it was that his one-touch finishing was actually really quite good. It was sort of his 2+ touch finishing. There were times where clearly when he had more time to think, he just overthought or couldn't make a good decision. That actually as a reactive finisher, he was really quite good. Which again is just a case of them needing to sort of maximize that and get more out of him. But his direct speed is incredible. I watched a lot of him when he was at Benfica. He's actually a player that Brighton was sort of rumored to sign. He's a bit clunky. He's a bit like Martinelli, I think. He's not as a dribbler and as a carrier. He's not particularly aesthetic to watch. He doesn't quite glide like Salah does. He just looks like a pure sprinter almost. He just takes up ground so quickly. But I really liked Gakpo across the front line. I saw a fair bit of him when he was at PSV and when he's played internationally. I think the beauty of him is that he can fulfill so many different roles and play in so many different ways. I'm still not sure, and I wasn't sure a year ago sort of where his best position was, because you sort of put him out on the left, he can produce a good final ball. His set piece taking is really, really good. Despite his size, I think he's not ridiculously good aerially. I think he's a better finisher with his feet. But he's just so versatile that I think just want to play him in different roles and almost at times, allow for those rotations, sort of Arsenal style, where Martinelli might come inside and Jesus will go wide. There's no reason why Nunez and Gakpo can't do similar things. So I think that part is definitely really exciting, and 2 young players with an awful lot of time left to develop.
It's such a nice headache to have in it with Nunez and Gakpo as 2 options up front, and even Jota to throw into the mix. The big difference between Nunez and Gakpo, Nunez is a proper number 9, it seems like. I know he just out to the left a few times, but he's a proper striker. He wants to be in the box, wants to score goals. Gakpo's taking that Firmino role anyway. He doesn't mind dropping back. Nunez won't do that. Nunez won't drop back. He'll just think straight forward ahead. Would you say we've got Diaz and Salah on the wings? Would you say Gakpo suits it more down to it's just taking off Firmino?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's probably the better passer of that group of players. I also really like Diogo Jota. I think his aerial ability, particularly for his size, is absolutely phenomenal and incredible, and has really kicked on since he's gone to Liverpool from Wolves. So it was honestly, I think, a shame as well that Fabio Carvalho wasn't more in the discussion sort of last season and earlier on this season, or going into the season. Sorry, because I watched him at Fulham quite a bit, and he was phenomenal. So they just really stocked up on all these really elite players that can operate on the left-hand side. So yeah, I think currently, unless things can quite well change in terms of both Nunez and Gakpo's game, but conscious of not just trying to see it as a way of replacing that Firmino and that my role of needing that inverted winger and that ball playing sort of or to feet number 9 sort of thing.
With Cody's flexibility. And I've kind of thrown this on our chat sometimes as well. I can see a place where he can actually shift, even with it's been proven he's been able to drop back and receive the ball in midfield, turn and start attacking actions. I think he can kind of shift even further back and, depending on who's around him, play midfield for us. Do you think he's that flexible enough to take on that role or fill a need if we need?
Yeah, no, I think that he'd work very well in that. Particularly, you could put him alongside someone like McAllister or Szoboszlai in an advanced area, and I think that's part of the Dutch or the how in the Netherlands they develop and coach players, that you do tend to get. I'm broad strokes here, largely generalising, but you get these players that are so flexible and so capable across the different phases.
With that, then, with the Gakpo situation, would it be again dependent on the opposition, dependent who's playing alongside him as well? You need that workhorse again. That attacking, it's a bit like putting Curtis Jones into the DM. He's already got that attacking mind on. He needs the protection then behind him. If Gakpo was to drop back, he needs that really strong protection behind him. That's why a number 6 role is completely. It's just so vital, and getting the right one in this summer. And again, would it work only against the smaller teams? Would you play Cody Gakpo against a Man City or in midfield, or against a Man United or an Arsenal or something?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I think just the struggle Liverpool have at the moment is lots of really good profiles, and particularly lots of unrefined profiles of young players that can do numerous different things, which is as much a good thing as it is, as you said, like a headache or a difficulty, because then you go, well, how do we start to refine this? It's not hugely obvious where this player is best played, and you go, oh, if I put him in the number 9, do I lose out on him then having him out on the wing? So it's kind of, I think, consistently juggling or trying different combinations until you find different things that work. And as you say, it depends on not only the quality of opposition, but the structure you're coming up against, if it's a back 5 or a back 4, how a team is, if they're going to press you high, if they're going to sit deeper. So it's I guess you never really know until it kind of works, which is a really silly way to say it, but like, it just takes, I think, the open-mindedness sometimes to try things or try something different. And at times it'll be, okay, it didn't work then, come back to it a few months later. Maybe it needs more training, or the stuff we don't see on the training ground to work on techniques or tactics or shape. And then it can also come together that way.
So with the market kind of closing down, Liverpool obviously we feel as fans still have at least a couple of players that have a couple of holes that they need to fill. But one of those holes, I'm not sure how much you've been able to watch. One of those holes that I feel we don't have anymore is a backup to Mo Salah. And I think Bento is that backup. From what you've seen from him, do you think he should remain with the first team, learning and playing those spot starts or lower league competitions? Or what's your opinion on the player?
I'll be honest, I haven't seen much of him, but I was speaking to Mark Carey about him the other day, and he rates him very, very highly. And of course, I know Liverpool have got a very good track record of bringing through quite a few different youngsters. So as someone with a background in academy football, I'm always very biased towards always trying to maximise the opportunity for a young player to come through. I think it always makes sense. Like, he can spend time either training with the first team, being part of matchday squads. Okay. And it's something Bryce, I think, have done quite well. Maybe you do that for the first 4 or 5 months of the season. And if they don't quite break through, or, then at Christmas time, you go, oh, let's maybe send him out on loan, give him some more game time. You can benefit from both ways in that sense. Because I think people at times almost overvalue a loan, in the sense of, like, you can have a lot of development by training with, the first team, maybe playing games for 21s, or for, just being part of the squad and developing and learning from those players. And then you might go, okay, let's also get him a few thousand minutes or a number of games to test him in a different way. So I'd always be for having a number of young players, I think, there. And yeah, you never know when someone's going to break through. And also, if there's injuries or spots just open up, you change a tactic and it suits a player. That there's so many inevitables, but unpredictable inevitables that might happen, that you just need to be prepared for in that regard.
Sometimes it is a good thing to do, is keeping them back, because if you look at the example, Steven Gerrard, for example, came through at 17 years old, didn't go out on loan anyway. He played through, got himself into the first team under Gary McAllister, Jamie Redknapp, those sort of experienced players. And look at him, he took over Redknapp eventually. He took over McAllister's place. He took the armband off Ukia. So certain players you can bring in, and I think like Vigo said, being an unstudy, Mo Salah, I think, is a perfect unstudy in terms of a perfect way to get him involved. I mean, it's not like we ain't got cover for that area anyway. RBL can play on the right, Szoboszlai can drift out wide. Even like Gakpo and Diaz alone can go out there if we are struggling, for example. So I think Dirk's in a perfect position for me now to stay at Liverpool, not go out on loan to a Blackburn like Elliott did, or I think is there. Maybe in the Europa League games this season, we talked about, saying playing Jones as 6 along backside someone else against the lower teams. Europa League's the perfect place to do it. If you are going to try something out, Europa League's perfect place that you're going to, no offence to everyone that's in the Europa League, but, Liverpool should be beating whoever comes up against, especially in the group stage. Going on back onto the forwards then, Liam, Diaz, Salah, Jota, Nunez, Gakpo. What 3 would you choose?
I mean, to be fair, that question normally gets answered itself, doesn't it? Because someone in that group's always normally injured. I've quite enjoyed Nunez off the left with him. I've quite enjoyed the Nunez, Gakpo, Salah. Again, I don't think Harvey Elliott's time as a winger is necessarily finished. I've enjoyed seeing him sort of in midfield more as a number 8. But yeah, then I think those 3 with maybe Jota to come off the bench to replace one of them sometime in the second half is a combination that I like. I think it's always just about having complementary players. So if you've got 2 real out to win sort of wingers that can run in behind, with them, it makes sense to have the Firmino style good passer to sort of play those through balls. But yeah, you could do it, and they should do it a number of different ways over the season. You don't want to always be predictable. You want to have different variations, because then it just becomes harder to defend against and gives you more options in games.
I talked about different variations well in the chat earlier, in our stream chat, about I said we should be getting Lavia and Thuram, for example, like a Kefren Thuram.
Yeah.
And they said, is he going to be accepted being a squad player, being on the bench? I said it's not going to be like that. He's going to come in and be competition. The exact same way what Jota was with Mane. Jota didn't come into Liverpool thinking I'm going to be first team. Mane was on the left at that time. Same with Diaz. They came in, pushed Mane. Mane eventually pushed up front because of Diaz. It's about competition, keeping people fresh and keeping people thinking, keep all these opposition players thinking. Someone like a Thuram allows the likes of McAllister and Szoboszlai to get rest and not drop off in terms of ability and in terms of standards.
Yeah.
Is it really they call it a squad player? I call him a rotational player. I call that a rotational thing where you can keep refreshing it up and. Do you agree with that? Do you think we should get in as well as, say, I'm only putting Lavia out there because he's absolutely the number 1 target at the moment. Would you say getting in like Kefren Thuram is a good idea as well, or do you think is he going to accept being a bench player, as some people say?
Yeah, I think it's about raising the floor of the team as well as raising the ceiling, that you want to have, as much quality and depth that I think other teams have struggled with that towards the top. That when you haven't got those quality replacements to bring in because people get injured or minutes just need to be limited, and you've got, as we say, sort of different options to be needed, that those signings can be as valuable, particularly when you're looking at minimizing weaknesses. I don't want to take you guys back to that horrible defense you had a few years ago with Kabak and stuff, and I dread to think the trauma you've got sort of attached to that, but it's that sort of thing of, okay, that is completely worst case scenario and a lot of things need to go wrong for that, but like it's elite sport, but these are human beings. People, their bodies break sometimes, or sales get made, things happen, that you just need to be prepared for. So I think, as you say, sort of having those players to push on in terms of competitivity can hopefully not only develop the player that they're coming in to sort of challenge, but also develop the player themselves, because then they've got, as you say, players to learn from, or it's just a high quality training group, which again you need to develop the whole team and to really push the whole group forward.
It keeps players on the toes as well, doesn't it? Because if McAllister or Szoboszlai obviously drop off, then there's someone behind them saying, I'm taking that place now.
I think that the impact of perhaps not being like a day 1 starter or sliding right into the first 11 has kind of been minimized now with the adoption of having 5 substitutes. And having the ability to interchange and swap out players lends itself to giving a lot of players a lot more opportunity to earn those minutes and gain that experience. So how much of an impact has the switch to having 5 subs had on the Premier League, in your opinion, tactically?
It's interesting. Yeah, no, I looked at it a bit data-wise, very rudimentary in terms of sort of goals and stuff at the end of the season. I think the proportion that you'd expect of like the minutes increase and the number of subs made was quite a bit up on the proportion of the number of goals and assists by subs. So they weren't always directly coming on and scoring goals, assisting goals. And I appreciate there's way more ways to impact a game than that. But it's also interesting that the top teams weren't always the ones up at the top. Everyone said, it'll be big six teams that this favours because they can bring on players to kill a game. Well, they don't always need to, because some of the time they're 3-4 up and the subs they're making aren't to come on and get a fifth and sixth. It's like
Pep at the time didn't even make any subs, did he? Pep at the time
there was famously, I think it was Leipzig in the first leg where it's like I didn't want to change things. So it's, and people have looked at where I work at the Athletic, people have looked at the data across it, and there's no, like, statistically, there's no correlation between the subs that you make and the success that you have, because there was, people would figure it out and people would use it in a tactical way. So I agree completely that, there's the term I see sort of used now in some coaching circles and in elite level sides is it's called a finisher as the player. You don't have like a starting 11. You've got starters and you've got finishers. It's not, you're a substitute, you're on the bench. It's like, no, you can have a very specific role. I've got memories of Adam Lafondra sort of growing up, coming off the bench in the Premier League for Reading, just scoring goals, and like that is now a valuable asset. And it's probably slightly more Americanized in the sense of having different squads, particularly in the NFL and stuff, like an offense and a defense. That I think people are slowly getting more to grips with. And there will be players that it suits to come on and play 20 minutes that you don't need to play a full 90, and that maybe is slightly skewed a little bit more towards forwards, because you can come on and impact a game. And, if you're a winger or a quick player, you can run at tired legs and tired defenses. So there's different ways it can be used, but I think it does have interesting tactical repercussions. It sort of splits the game up really into like a first 60 minutes where everyone's got a game plan, and that's how you can see what the initial tactical ideas look like and how the patterns want to play out. And then when goals go in and subs get made, you're like, it just seems to open the game up both ways. I think it massively happened at the World Cup where subs just destabilize both teams, and that they offer you fresh legs, but also if you're defending in a real tight-knit unit and players aren't even mentally warm in the game, knowing when to track someone and stay in shape or when to press, that it just seems to, I think a good way for most fans sort of neutrally, as someone who has to analyze it, can be a bit chaos sometimes, where you go from nice, neat, organized passing to suddenly it's transitions left and right across the pitch and the ball's bouncing back and forth. But I think particularly for young players that can be sort of not necessarily lucrative, but as you say, that can be a role they can fulfill that isn't just make up numbers on a training pitch and be a traffic cone, if you will.
The term super sub is no longer a thing, really. Back in the day, Solskjaer at Man United, for example, used to come on. He used to be literally the bench player and come on and score a goal. Well, now, these players that are on the bench, they want to be first teamers. They don't consider themselves as subs. And like you said, it's like an interchange. And I think in NFL myself, and the way they interchange players and rugby over here as well, because they interchange on and off. Yeah. It'd be interesting to see football do that. They're rolling on and off. I don't think it'd ever work, and I don't think it'd make it as competitive. I just think it'd spoil it. But it's interesting how you view it as these players are no longer being the more squad players rather than subs. I think that, like I said, this term super sub is. I just don't think it's no longer a thing really anymore.
No, I think it's also because you look at like the proportion of goals that get scored in the final 50 minutes of games, that you get more goals in that period than any other 50-minute period in the game. Games get decided late on now. So, having a player that can operate in the last 30 minutes, they're going to be part of the deciding moments of the game even more. So I guess in that way, it's not just the time that you play, but it's the value you can offer in that period. So if you can come on and help shore up a defense or offer a different solution, then you are equally as valuable, if not maybe more valuable, than someone that plays more game time, because your actual impact on the team might be more decisive with a result. So I think it's just like having a mindset shift in that regard.
All right. As far as impact as a whole, Pep obviously has a huge impact, and his coaching tree seems to have branched off to numerous teams as well. And you're a fan, obviously, of Brighton, and De Zerbi is getting tons of plaudits as far as tactically the changes he's made and the positional versatility. Apparently, everyone on your team can play every single position almost. Going forward, who do you foresee is going to have the biggest impact this year as far as tactically? Who's going to have their plaudits sang the most?
I've seen an awful lot of praise for Iraola at Bournemouth. They look like they could be an exciting team. I've not watched too much of La Liga, but I've heard really good things from some people that I work with that follow that quite closely, that say his sort of style of play is really exciting. I actually did a piece sort of last week on teams that I thought were tactically interesting to watch this season. Michael Carrick's Middlesbrough stood out in that for me. They were really good at the tail end of last season, playing a really nice sort of attacking football. And Xabi Alonso's Leverkusen, again, playing a nice sort of back three, not dissimilar to Liverpool, sort of 3-4-3. But yeah, you can go anywhere in Europe now and find a whole host of quality young coaches, and I think the volume of young coaches that are really good is really stepping up as more players come out of the game and want to be. I don't think anyone seems to want to be a pundit really anymore now. It seems like a focus on lots of these players, particularly central midfielders that I guess see the game in a certain way, that play in a controlled manner in that sort of orchestrator in midfield that now want to be coaches is really exciting. So I'm giving it 5-10 years until the centre backs and the strikers start becoming coaches again, and we just get a completely different brand of football, and it all goes out of the water.
Koulibaly over at Burnley.
Yeah, there you go. So someone
Klopp
like that.
was a centre back.
Yeah, when Thiago Silva retires in presumably 10 years' time with the rate he's going at, and comes in and starts playing some. Or Sergio Ramos just being a set piece coach and scoring headers.
It makes absolute sense, doesn't it? Centre midfielders being turned into coaches and managers, because they are the magicians, they are the brains on the pitch, and that's what they were. You likes of Xavi coming through at Barcelona now, taking over Lampard, Gerrard. I know obviously Lampard didn't go too well, Gerrard didn't go too well at Villa, but they've taken over because they see the game. Midfielders see the game, midfielders see the whole pitch, and they know how to motivate. But they are the leaders. I mean, you go back to
the captains, right?
So that's centre backs are midfielders usually. Going on to then proper coaches, then Jurgen Klopp and his tactics. Let me ask you first, then. I know you're a Brighton fan, but as a football fan, have you enjoyed Jurgen Klopp's tenure? Have you enjoyed watching Jurgen Klopp?
Yeah. The only parts that I struggle with is that I think as someone that was raised primarily watching the Premier League and on the English side of things, that I tend to quite enjoy the out of possession side of things more, the defensive side. I think it's easier to see patterns when you're looking at pressing and stuff. So the pressing stuff I've absolutely loved. I think it's phenomenal. The intricacies of it, where players are arcing their runs, people are knowing when to track things and go tight, and when you can then turn that into opportunities to make regains out of the pitch, and you make more goals from it, and you make more chances. I think is it's become quite sexy in recent years, defending, which is amazing, because people used to hate it and trying to coach that to players, where now you can say, no, this is a way we get more goals, we get to attack more. It's we do more defending upfield, so we do less sort of downfield. And I think the way that he's gone toe to toe with City in a very different way can only be admired. Particularly as someone who again came across, and the way the English media are, unfortunately, means that any coach that isn't English that comes from continental Europe or wider instantly has an awful lot more to wrongly have to try and prove just because of who they are. So I think just again to see him prove people wrong has been wonderful. And I enjoyed his Dortmund before as well, sort of when I was younger watching those. So he's always worked with those sorts of teams, So it's been good fun so far. I hope he sticks around. I hope it's not people are giving him that 7-year myth or whatever it is, which just can't be a thing.
Past that now, right?
yeah, well, exactly. But it's also it's happened 2 or 3 times. I'm like, I could be guilty as anyone else of seeing something 2 or 3 times, but I'm like, it's not provable. That's such a long period of time that it doesn't work like that.
Liam, we know there's more reasons to why Jurgen Klopp hasn't had as much success at Liverpool than Jurgen Klopp himself. There's things above that are not helping him at the moment. Talking about the pressing, then it has been exciting football. I mean, Pep himself has been scared of this. He saw in the Amazon Prime video, the documentary under City, and he was terrified of that front three. He was terrified of Jurgen Klopp's pressing, and it has given that least. I think this. I won't say it's. People Man City fans like to say this rivalry between Liverpool and Man City. I think it's more Pep and Klopp. And I think it's this has come out about these two. This rivalry has never been a thing between Liverpool and Man City. Obviously, Manchester and Liverpool not getting along, but we're rivals with Manchester United. Man City weren't even a thing back in the 90s and early 2000s. Pep and Klopp, which style do you like better then? Is it the Pep or the Klopp one?
It's a good question. I don't know. I genuinely think I'm quite on the fence there, because I really enjoy the fact that when it comes to games between them, they're so different to watch. I'm thinking back to the 1-0 at Anfield last season, where obviously Salah scored the goal on the breakaway. I think that was the first game where we saw City sort of 3-4-3 with the defender coming into midfield and the wing backs. And I love the way that Liverpool played, in the sense of their identity was very different to City, and saying, fine, we're going to beat you at a different game. It's not people saying, oh, we're going to go and match you up shape wise. And it's one of those games where you get to the end of it and you're just sort of quite emotionally drained, because it becomes so intense, and then it stays goalless for so long, and so many of the games between you guys have been so tight and so close, and City, you can just never seem to score a penalty or win. So I think maybe more of the in possession stuff for City can be easier on the eye to watch, particularly from an analytical perspective, where there's more sort of passing patterns to break down. But I've always been a lover of counter-attack goals, and just having the fact that you can release a winger and cut inside and score. So there's I think there's a lot to like about both teams. That's why they've become so good. It's footballing theatre as far as I'm concerned when Liverpool and City face off. It's fantastic.
So the thing is, Jurgen Klopp's been actually speaking about it. He did it in an interview just before, I think it was with LCB, that he's wanted to be more possession. Do you think it's gonna work? Do you think his gegenpressing is gonna come out of it a little bit and into possession football? I think it's just gonna be a part of the pitch where he's gonna use gegenpressing.
Yeah, I think it's always to respond to stuff, right? That often, people confuse all the Barcelona tiki taka stuff as, passing for possession's sake. But what I'm told is, and what I learned, is that they pass short because by having players close together, if you lose it, you're in position to counter press. It actually makes it easier rather than hitting big diagonals and people being sort of spread out. So yeah, I think they sort of go in hand. If you can keep possession further upfield, then actually, and you've got more bodies and better spacing upfield, then if you do lose it, suddenly you're in a position to jump on teams and press them straight away there. And if they're pinned back deeper, then they've not got the players up the field to release and get out on counter attack. So it feels like across the league we're seeing more of a broad shift towards possession. I've quite enjoyed the fact that Liverpool, some of their super strengths have been counter attacking and set pieces, which seen as quite old-fashioned things in football, but I still really like them, and they're always going to be effective, especially as more teams become possession heavy. There's more opportunity to transition, so possibly, but I think it will still benefit on the counter-pressing perspective.
All right. So before we wrap up today's podcast, I kind of want to get your thoughts on the year and your predicted top four for the Premier League.
Oh, crikey. Set me up to fail here, aren't you? It's going to be...
Brighton's in there. Brighton's going to be in there, aren't they?
No,
you know what? Don't rule them out. Don't rule them out.
No, of course not. I was speaking about this to someone earlier on, but I was saying that, like, for Brighton to come that high up, I said they could go and hit 60 or plus points again. That is a phenomenal season. It's then just relying on other top teams crashing and falling off a bit, which they can't control. It's like an athletics, a sprinter wanted to run a certain time, and if other people do run quicker, then you have to go, fine, so be it. We can't really control that.
And you've got Europe as well.
Exactly. So there's more to juggle there. So it still feels hard to look past City for the title, just based on how good they were. I'm interested with Arsenal because I think it's either going to stick really well or it's going to fall apart a little bit, because their plan A of their style was really effective and it worked for a large part of the season. And then the wheels kind of came off a bit all at once and they tried to adapt and it couldn't really work. So I could see them either coming a close second again or heading off into sort of fourth if signings don't stick and their changes don't work. So I'll say City top, and in no particular order below that, United, Arsenal and Liverpool, I think, in no particular.
But we know Liverpool above Man United, yeah. We know.
Well,
that.
Of course, I couldn't come to Liverpool podcast and say otherwise, could I?
We know.
I wouldn't be so blasphemous.
We'll take that as red.
There you go.
All right, Liam, thank you so much once again for coming on the podcast and lending your expertise. For those of you listening, you can follow Liam at The Athletic for his latest pieces, as well as on Twitter /X, whatever it's called today, at Liam Tharme, Coach. Liam, thank you once again so much for joining.
An absolute pleasure. Thank you guys for having me.
All right. Once again, this has been an episode of the LC Transfer Room podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe. Have a great day.